Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping into this incredible story about crisis and innovation. It's really a blueprint for growth that came out of a moment when one of history's fastest-growing movements was on the bridge of its first major breakdown. So think about this for a second. What happens when your greatest success is the very thing that's about to cause your biggest breakdown? I mean, it's a wild thought, isn't it? Imagine your organization is growing so fast, so successfully that it actually starts to crack from the inside. The thing you've been working for is now threatening to tear it all apart. Well, this isn't some hypothetical business school case study. This is exactly what happened in the very early days of the Christian faith. Right as the movement was taking off, its own explosive growth created an internal crisis that almost stopped it dead in its tracks. Okay, so let's set the scene. The problem wasn't coming from the outside, not yet anyway. The very first major threat was actually an inside job, you could say. It was sparked by the cultural growing pains of their own incredible success. Now, at the heart of this whole conflict were two really distinct cultural groups. On one side, you had the Hebraic Jews. These were folks native to the land. They spoke Aramaic. On the other side were the Hellenistic Jews. They'd come from all over the Roman Empire, they spoke Greek, and they just had different customs. And even though they were all united in this new faith, those old cultural fault lines, well, they were about to cause a quake. So the actual complaint, pulled right from the source, wasn't some big theological debate. No, it was intensely practical and deeply personal. The widows from the Greek-speaking group, some of the most vulnerable people in the whole community, were being overlooked when food was handed out each day. And this wasn't just some small administrative error. It was a symptom of a really dangerous division that was forming. So how did the leaders respond to this? This is the moment where the story takes a turn from crisis to, honestly, just sheer genius. The apostles' response wasn't to get defensive or to brush off the problem. Instead, they applied some really profound strategic wisdom. In this one sentence, the apostles really nailed the core issue. Now, they weren't saying that practical service was unimportant, not at all. What they were saying was that their unique and non-delegable job was prayer and teaching the word. If they got bogged down in managing logistics, their most vital contribution would be totally lost. They understood the power of focus. So they proposed this brilliant two-part solution. First, they said, we're going to double down on our core mission. And second, they empowered the community itself, saying, you choose leaders to handle this new, vital area of service. This is a perfect example of wise delegation. They weren't just dumping a problem on someone else, they were creating a whole new area of ownership and ministry. And this is so important. They didn't just ask for anybody to volunteer. The qualifications for this brand new role were incredibly high, and that tells you just how important this practical service really was to them. I mean, just look at this list. They weren't looking for event planners or accountants. They needed people with sterling character, people who were spiritually alive and just full of practical wisdom. This tells us that right from the very beginning, the church saw tasks like administration and service not as just, secular jobs, but as deeply spiritual callings. And the language here, it reveals such a profound truth. The Greek word they used for this work is diakonia. And what's fascinating is that it's the same root word they used to describe both the serving of tables and the apostles' ministry of the word. So in their eyes, both jobs were equal in value and in dignity. They were just different functions that required different, but equally spirit-led people. And here it is. Here's the masterstroke. Who did the community pick? They chose 7 men, and every single one of them had a Greek name. Think about that. They directly addressed the complaint from the Greek-speaking widows by empowering leaders from their own community. It was just this powerful act of reconciliation, and it proved that the solution was designed from the ground up to heal the division. So what happened after they solved this huge internal problem? Did things just go back to normal? Oh no, not at all. The results were absolutely explosive. By getting their house in order and restoring unity, they basically just unleashed the mission. First and foremost,
With the apostles now completely focused on their primary calling, the core message of the movement started to advance without anything holding it back. The engine was firing on all cylinders again.
And that spreading word had a very direct effect. The number of believers began to multiply, and fast. The momentum wasn't just restored, it accelerated. That order and that unity created the perfect conditions for exponential growth. But this might be the most stunning result of all. A large number of Jewish priests became believers. I mean, just take a second to think about that. The very religious establishment that had been, for the most part, opposing this movement was now joining it. This proved the message wasn't just growing on the fringes, it was breaking through into the most resistant parts of society. So you see, this isn't just some dusty old story. It's a timeless blueprint for any group, any organization, any church that wants to handle the pressures of growth in a healthy, productive way. So what does this blueprint for growth really teach us? Well, first, you've got to deal with internal problems, and you've got to do it fast. Second, figure out your core mission and prioritize it by delegating wisely. Third, empower leaders based on their character and their wisdom, not just their skill set. Fourth, recognize that every single role is a vital spiritual ministry. And finally, never forget that unity is the fuel for your mission. And that really just leaves us with a final question to chew on. Whether it's in your workplace, your community, your church, is there a crisis of growth happening somewhere? And maybe more importantly, are the right people being empowered for the right mission so that everyone can truly flourish? It's a blueprint that is just as powerful and relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago.